Hey everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I'm going to be talking about the Tier 10 French auto-loading tank destroyer and possibly the most dangerous tank in the game that you really don't want to sit in front of for any amount of time, let alone for its full 2,400 damage burst which it deals over 10 seconds. It is of course the AMX 50 Foch B. So this vehicle I'm going to be calling the unbalanceable tank because that's really how I feel about the tank. Back in the day, the original Tier 10 French tank destroyer was the AMX 50 Foch 155, whatever you want to be calling it. That vehicle originally had 850 alpha damage in a 3-round magazine that was capable of just absolutely dominating. Then Wargaming decided to massively nerf the vehicle. They reduced its alpha damage along with all of the other tank destroyers, I must add, and a huge bunch of damage nerfs. Also with some armor that they removed from the vehicle to try to make the weak points a lot more vulnerable than they were. And then they replaced it with this, a vehicle that not really too many people talk about, not really too many people seem to care about. It is the Foch B. They changed it from having a 155mm gun to having a 120mm gun. But still, the vehicle is pretty much unbalanceable. Now, it's a bit of a paradox with my statement there, because I would argue that the vehicle is actually kind of quite balanced inside World of Tanks, but it has come at the expense of the vehicle being fun. That's my opinion. This is one of my least favorite Tier 10 tank destroyers to play, because it's just investing all of its statistics in one area. It's a kind of tank that if it was a role player and it was choosing all of its stats at the beginning of a session, that it would be one of those kind of players who just wants to put everything into one single stat to be good at that one single aspect, and that is that big damage burst. Now, it can be very effective inside World of Tanks when you've got big damage per minute and you can burst it out quickly like on this tank. What was that Object 430 going to do? That Object 430 was quite rightly trying to contest the most important location on the map of Live Oaks, and that would be the dip. Whoever wins the dip usually ends up going around and flanking their opponents and winning the battle, or at least having a very high chance of being able to win the battle. But when we got there, we were just the ultimate tank for being able to win a 1 versus 1 engagement. And if you want to be successful in a French autoloading tank destroyer like this one, it's all about trying to create those 1 versus 1 engagements. If you can isolate someone, then there is no better tank in the game for just absolute destruction. And you're seeing right now that I'm going to just choose this Leopard prototype. I'm going to auto-aim at them for my first shot, then I'm going to aim at the rear of their vehicle, I'm going to set them on fire, and then you know what, well right Mr. Conqueror, you want to be a little bit cheeky to me, I'm going to put a few rounds into you as well. I'm going to put 3 rounds through your upper hull there, and the Conqueror was able to do 2 shots to me. Yeah, that is what burst damage is all about inside this tank. And he's thinking like, okay, this guy's reloading, so I'm going to pretend like I'm going still loaded and rushing up on there. And I'm going to ask the Leopard for help, and then hopefully the Leopard's going to deal with the Conqueror. When I checked the post-game stats, I could see that this Conqueror was actually a fairly decent player. And what was he going to do? He had to try and be aggressive there. He had to try and pressure the Foch B while it's reloading. But funnily enough, this tank, even though it does have that 2,400 burst damage within 10 seconds of the first shot, it also doesn't even have that long of a reload. You can get it down to about 35 with good crew skills or even slightly below. And then in this kind of a situation, I'm just hoping that I can help my Leopard prototype out here, but oh dear, with the artillery shells, 2 of them I believe, and the Kranvang's magazine, I was just unable to help the Leopard prototype. And that's really another reason why I hate this tank, and why I guess Wargaming also removed the WT Alfie 100. When you think about it, the WT Alfie 100 had originally a 6-round auto-loading Yank Tiger gun. 560 alpha damage, times by 6, that was 3,300 damage in a magazine, or 3,360 in a magazine, right? It was absolutely monstrous what that vehicle was capable of doing. Wargaming decided that that was too extreme, then they reduced it to 5 rounds, then they nerfed the gun handling, then they nerfed other aspects of the vehicle, but they just couldn't balance that tank. That was really the unbalanceable vehicle, because the final move was that Wargaming decided that this is poor tank design and we're going to remove it from the game. But this is about as close as you can get to the old WT Alfie 100. Of course, it doesn't have that turret, and it doesn't have that kind of big penetration that the old WT Alfie 100 had. But it still suffers from that same principle, and that is that if you create a vehicle that is so much of a one-trick that is able to create that insane burst potential how do you balance the other aspects of the tank? Do you make it slow? Do you make it vulnerable? Do you make it have some kind of really awful gun handling? Do you give it the worst penetration? Well, Wargaming have done quite a lot to this tank along those lines. It does have the worst penetration of any tier 10 tank destroyer. It is also quite vulnerable when it's reloading, although its reload isn't as long as it probably should be. And also you can track the tank, get its side, or you can try and shoot the 2 weak points that are on top of the vehicle that you can see knowledgeable people will be making Swiss cheese out of, just like that Conqueror did. But still, how do you stop it from all-inning you? That's the issue, and that's why the statistics of this vehicle have been reduced to the point where I just don't find the vehicle very fun. But that's just me. But it's also, I wouldn't say it's the most popular tank. You don't see all of these out on the battlefield, and I think that's probably a good thing. I'd like to clarify that. I don't want to be back in a state of World of Tanks where everybody's playing the WT Alfie 100, where everybody's just going in and farming with big, bursty magazines. I think there's enough autoloaders in the game. I say that just as, oh god, this FE405 is going to wedge us up. Do you see how I raised the gun there? Now, I didn't actually quite manage to do it, but I wanted to raise the gun to see if I could catch the high explosive round from the FE405 to get it to splash away from my weak point, because I was worried that he might be firing one of his high explosive squash head rounds that could have one-shot my vehicle, right? Luckily for me, even though that's an incredibly dangerous tank, he wasn't able to pen with his regular high explosive round, and we were able to just put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in, carving up the entire tank. And that is what the issue is with this vehicle. How can you stop it from being able to all-in you in these situations? Well, Wargaming, I guess, have done a fairly good job of being able to balance the vehicle to a point where not too many people want to play it. And that's good, because as I was saying, just before that FE405 rudely interrupted us, that I don't want to ever get into a situation of World of Tanks where there are more WT Alfie 100s in the game. Because it ends up with games like this. We are 7 minutes into this game of World of Tanks. I've carved up pretty much 5 entire tanks, tier 9 and tier 10 vehicles. We've done 8,000 damage in 7 minutes and picked up 5 kills. Now, don't get me wrong, this is definitely the dream scenario for this vehicle. This is one of those great games. Look, the T-49 thought I was over there. No, mate, I'm over here, buddy. He's still stunned, so he's quite slow. He misses me. And my plan was to ram kill the player while I was reloading, but unfortunately that wasn't to be. And then the artillery shuts me down with a parting gift. And yeah, probably it is artillery, one of the things that can actually manage to rebalance one of these vehicles, because if an artillery shell hits your tank and you lose your repair kit, then that makes you quite vulnerable to other medium tanks and heavy tanks. So, the Foch B, with the 120mm main armament, definitely one of the most, it is the most dangerous tank to sit in front of in World of Tanks. But you think that that would mean that it was more fun to play. But at least, in my opinion, whenever I play this tank, I just become wholeheartedly disappointed with the vehicle. Sure, you can have these dream scenarios, and we had about 4 of them in this game, where you're just all-inning that tank and you're shutting them down with all of the rounds that you have at your disposal. No better burst potential inside the game. But you kind of come to expect that, and then when you don't have the ultimate feeling, when you don't have that ultimate result, where you are dealing with the tank and you've managed to isolate your opponents, it just feels like it's just disappointing. It really is. And that's why I feel that this is the unbalanceable tank, because as it stands with that ultimate all-in damage potential, you can't have enough statistics in other areas of the vehicle to just make it fun. And I can only presume that's why the Foch B is the least popular tier 10 tank destroyer on the European server, except of course the one that we don't talk about, the WZ-113G FT. So unsurprisingly, this was an ace tanker for the 50 Foch B here, and a high caliber for the 8,000 damage that we dealt within 7.5 minutes. What was the enemy team really going to do? We hit every shot we fired, of which 22 penetrated, but I did fire a disgusting amount of gold ammunition, as you have to in this vehicle, due to it having the worst penetration of any tier 10 tank destroyer. Who had the fun? I guess, well, Wargaming had the fun because I lose credits even running a premium account. Was I meant to have fun for the 8,000 damage that I dealt here? I guess, but after you've done it a couple of times, the effect truly wears off. I guess the real people who had fun were people who were watching the live stream at the time, but certainly not the enemy team. With tier 9 tech tree tanks like the Object 430 and the Leopard prototype, not even doing a single hit point of damage as we mercilessly cut them down. So the 50 Foch B, in my opinion, poor tank design. I like the idea of the vehicle, but the way that Wargaming have it balanced right now, there's no way that they can actually leave its damage potential as good as it can be, or shall I say, as good as it is, without leaving the other aspects of the vehicle just lacking. And those are the ones that give the holistic nature of a tank, that allow it to be flexible in all situations and not just the dream scenarios that you saw. And I'd personally like to see the vehicle reimagined either this year or over the next few years. It's clear that this 120mm just isn't cutting it at tier 10, and this big magazine, while it's able to perform in that 1 versus 1 dream scenario, it's just not cutting it in the actual nitty-gritty fights in World of Tanks, where it's usually 1 or 2 shots or even 3 shots that matter from an autoloader, not the 6 that you've got to try and make work in this tank. Wargaming could either do this by shortening the mag, making it smaller, increasing the alpha damage, increasing the penetration of the vehicle, or alternatively, maybe it could be the first auto-reloading tank destroyer. Of course, probably with much, much worse DPM and even a smaller mag. I think that would give this vehicle at least something special and make it a lot more fun to play without, just so we say, removing the vibe of being that French all-in TD. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for today. Really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments what you think about the 50 Foch B. Do you think it's absolutely an incredible tank that you enjoy playing on the battlefield a huge amount? Or do you kind of feel like me, that it's fun maybe for a couple of games, but after that, it's definitely not something that you want to keep playing? And if you're watching this video on Sunday as it's released, it's time for the World of Tanks Tech Tree Showcase, live right now on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby. And this week, seeing how the Rinoceronte and the Italian auto-reloading heavy tanks just came out with update 1.11.1, then I'm going to feature them tonight. So come along for the inaugural Italian auto-reloading heavy tank tech tree showcase, as I showcase the entirety of the line and give you all of my tips and tricks for the tier 7, 8, 9 and 10 new tanks, so that you too can become the master of the Italian auto-reloading heavy. So, I'm really looking forward to seeing you all right now on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby. As always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.